Good morning, Bapi sir. Good morning, Shushma ma'am. I hope
Good morning, Aradhana. Good morning.
ma'am,
How are you?
yes, ma'am,
I'm good. I'm good.
yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Ma'am, I think currently we have with us Biswa Prakash sir. He's from Odisha, and today he is the speaker of the session, as well as
Okay.
Praful Rao.
We have Praful Rauji also. Good morning to both the esteemed speakers. This is Dr. Sushma Guleria from the National Institute of Disaster Management.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Good
One more
morning.
speaker, yeah, one more
Good morning.
speaker will be joining
Yeah.
soon.
I cannot recollect the name. Yeah, it is, I think, Gokulji.
Yes, Mr. Gokulji
Yeah.
from Keystone
Okay.
Foundation. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. 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 Aradhana, let the number reach 50, then we can start maybe. Okay.
Ma'am, shall I start the session?
Just wait.
Okay.
Just few more minutes.
Okay.
I think let the number touch around 50. All right?
Yes.
Yeah. Aradhana, let's start. What do
Yes.
you say?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
let's start.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we have got at least 45 participants.
Yeah, so yeah, that's decent. They'll join.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. I'm audible, right?
Yeah, very much.
Okay. So, good morning and a very warm welcome to the webinar on the role of local organization and their interaction in disaster risk mitigation. especially in this time of pandemic. This webinar is organized by National Institute of Disaster Management under Ministry of Home Affairs. Firstly, I would like to welcome our Executive Director, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindal, who has always guided and motivated us to conduct various webinars. I would also like to invite, I'm sorry. Oh God. I would also like to invite our Dr. Shishma, who is the Assistant Professor of National Institute of Disaster Management. This webinar is able to come into limelight only because of Dr. Shishma Guleria and her support and guidance. I would like to introduce and invite the esteemed speakers of our session. Today we have with us Sir Praful Rao, who is retired Indian Air Force, a wing commander, and also the president of Save the Hill organization here in Kalimpong town. We have with us Mr. Vishwa Prakash Bhattacharya, who is Chief Executive Officer of Santa Foundation, and he is joining us today with, all the way from Orissa. And we have with us Mr. Gokul, who heads the Water and Sanitation Program at Keystone Foundation. And so we are very grateful and delighted to have this diverse speakers from various backgrounds. I'm extremely sorry for the background noise. I would like to invite Dr. Shishma Guleria to kindly start with the inaugural session. Sorry.
Yeah. That's fine. Thank you so much, Aradhna. Warm welcome to all the participants, esteemed speakers, and just a bit of regret from our executive director, sir, because I think he's occupied today being the Army Day, and sir is from that background, so he is, I think, gone for attending some of that official ceremony. Uh, what should I say? Applaud to Aradhna. She was keen to have this topic also taken up, that is building on the local capacity and their integration into the disaster management realm. And a lot of you must be aware, and for a few of you it must be new, that we organize the Asian ministerial conferences every 3 years. And the last one that was held in 2016. After that, we are still to hold the next one, but which was inaugurated by Sri Narendra Modi ji. And in that, sir had given a sort of a framework and outline, a few agenda points. Out of them, Agenda 8 being the need to build on the local capacities and their initiatives, and then mainstreaming it into the disaster management sector. Sounds cliche, sounds something normal, but yes, our local governments are actually the first-hand, they have the first-hand knowledge of communities, social, economic, the infrastructure needs that would arise once a disaster situation arises. So their role becomes very paramount, and for a number of even up to several days, communities, they're on their own to manage, and that being the base of why a community empowerment becomes a key role, and wherein the local initiatives play an imperative role. So you have a myriad of informal local institutions that I think, Aradhna, there's some background noise. Is it from your end?
Ma'am, I can okay. Shaker, sir.
No worries. No, not voice, but it's okay. So we have a lot of such institutions, which have a lot of information, knowledge about standard local practices, specifically, whether it's the hill concerns or the plains or the coastal concerns. And then these, existing local institutions, now they can potentially play a role in bridging the gap between such establishment of such adaptive or resilient measures along with the development continuum, and that's where they can play a major role. The Sendai framework also, establishes the need for shifting our diversion from earlier the concept of disaster risk management to now a more proactive disaster risk reduction measures, and that can also be kind of streamlined at the local levels with the concept of local risk management initiatives, encompassing the entire dimensions of prevention, mitigation, preparedness that can be included. Few important roles like the local governments can play could be, coordinating and sustaining some of the multi-stakeholder platforms in their own specific regions, or if with respect to a specific hazard, maybe focusing on one particular hazard or then the disaster that may happen, and sustaining such efforts, especially in the the long-term recovery processes. So what happens is you establish a lot of reconstruction and rehabilitation measures as government initiatives or projects, but they don't sustain over a long duration, and that is where these local players can be roped in, and they can help in sustaining such measures. Such initiative institutes can also build in their own. They can strengthen their own capacities when when it comes to their understanding of practically what are the actions required for disaster risk reduction themselves. They can also be engaged for building the local communities, making them aware about the different government, their priorities, localized priorities, and how that can be, integrated in government initiatives. If I have to speak from a disaster management from the National Institute perspective, we take up, our basic mandate is training and capacity building, and for from a community-based disaster risk management perspective, we are now, when we ventured into training of the Panchayati Raj institutions, we are also encouraging and have involved ourselves with the district level governments in developing their district disaster management plans, up to encouraging them to have plans at the village level itself. And yes, being this, definitely, we are at the national level, and then that coordination which is required with all the states, and even going down up to the grassroots level, having that decentralized approach requires a lot of such networking. So with these few words, I wish that we get to listen to some of our esteemed speakers and take out a few key, maybe takeaways, and which we can also try at the national level, at our own levels, to integrate them in some of our future, calendar of events that we'll be looking forward to for 2021. So welcome once again to all the esteemed speakers, to all the participants, and over to you, Aradhana. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving ahead with the session, I would like to highlight the objectives of the webinar. So the very first objective of this webinar is to understand how NGOs are the first responders in times of crisis. The second objective is to understand how important is inclusion of communities in decision-making process, and are they really included? So that is what we would like to find out in this webinar. Are NGOs able to bring the modern knowledges and indigenous knowledges during the time of crisis? And we would also like to investigate how these local organizations have dealt with actual disaster events or have mitigated their impacts on their members and constituencies. So these were just the basic objectives of the webinar. Moving ahead with the session, I would like to invite our first speaker of the session. We have with us Sir Praful Rao. It is my honor to welcome Sir on this platform. Sir Praful Rao is a retired Indian Air Force Wing Commander, and is the president of Save the Hills. It is an NGO based in Kalimpong, working towards raising awareness among Darjeeling, Sikkim, Himalayan region about landslides.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think your voice is breaking. You have.
Over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Very much, sir. Very good morning, sir. Very much.
Good morning to everybody. My thanks to NIDM for allowing me to speak today. My association with NIDM goes several years back, when I happened to be talking there on landslides. I was called by Dr. Surya Prakash, whom I know for some years, And I talked when the venue was quite different. I think it was in the ITO area somewhere. And I did spend some time there, yes. My pleasure to be here again, to be talking on this occasion. I am from Kalimpong, and my talk today will be mostly related to issues in the mountains. So I will be talking specifically about landslides and maybe a little bit about earthquakes. Floods do not affect us. And having said that, I would like to say that Save the Hills is an organization, a very small NGO, which has been working in the Darjeeling Sikkim Himalayas since 2007. That's when we were formed. And we work primarily, we are a volunteer organization. Nobody gets paid. And the work that we are doing has been over a period of 10, 12 years, where we have had a measure of success in some things, which I will talk a little later. But before I start my talk on the work that we are doing, I just like to bring out the peculiarities of where we stay. So the next slide, please. If you have a look at this slide, you would see the red circle is where we are, the Darjeeling Sikkim Himalayas. And the blue circle is approximately the arc of the Himalayas. If you put a center somewhere way up in China, you see that the entire arc is a nice circle which forms. And the peculiarity of our place is that we are about 610 kilometers from the Bay of Bengal, and we are in the southernmost portion of the Himalayan arc. Being so, what is very, very unique is that between us and the plains, and the Bay of Bengal, there is the plains of Bengal, and towards the north of us lie the biggest mountains in the world. Kanchenjunga, which is the third highest mountain in the world, is clearly visible from our place, and it must be about 50, 60 or maximum kilometers from us. So therefore, we have the huge long plains which run down to the Bay of Bengal, up to the Sundarbans area, and where in the Bay of Bengal, some of the deadliest cyclones brew each year. Also, we fall in the direct path of the southwesterly monsoons. So we are the first big obstruction that the southwesterly monsoon winds come across. And therefore, we have some of the heaviest rainfall in the country, something like 3,000 to 4,000 millimeters, approximately double the rainfall that takes place in the Western Himalayas, say Uttarakhand. What we have observed is that there are perceptible changes in the rainfall patterns these days, which we'll come to slightly later. And also the fact that the Himalayas has been experiencing a huge population growth. And the development activities, much of which is unplanned, is also taking place at a frenetic pace in the Himalayas. So all these actually compound the disaster management scenario in our area. And the next slide, please. Next slide. So as per the World Bank, this is a report from 2013, the Himalayas has almost twice as many hydrological extreme events as the Ganges or the Tibetan Plateau. Next. Also, the temperature increases are increasing, decreasing at various places, are seen all across the length and breadth of Himalayas. Next, please. And also the increasing trends in precipitation and climate-related extremes in the entire Himalayan region. Next. And this is, of course, the super cyclone Amphon, which brewed up in the Bay of Bengal last year. One of the roles of our Save the Hills has been to very, very meticulously track these major cyclonic events and major weather events, and projected to in our website as well as in the in our um, WhatsApp group, so that people are of the movement of these storms and also the likely impact. This particular cyclone brewed up sometime in May, and these days I'm glad to tell you technology has advanced so much that for one thing, the meteorological forecasts are so accurate that it almost seems as if the meteorologist is sitting inside the storm and piloting to wherever he wants it to go. The accuracy of the landfall events and the timings are something to be believed. In this particular case, Cyclone Amphon was projected to come and hit Calcutta, which it almost did. Calcutta has not seen a storm of this intensity and nature ever. And of course, it was supposed to come directly north and come and hit us. Thankfully for us, it moved slightly towards the east. It went towards Meghalaya, where it created a lot of damage after the cyclone made landfall over Calcutta, near Calcutta. Next, please. And these are the disasters which affect the mountains and the differences between them. Landslides on the left-hand side and earthquakes on the right-hand side. Landslides are very localized. That may be an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is that landslides, comparatively, compared to other disaster forms, affect fewer people because one part of the hill may be totally safe and the other side might be very landslide prone. But the disadvantage is that many people do not know about landslides because it is so localized. So in Kalimpong, for example, most of Kalimpong people, most of the town, in fact, all of the town, do not know that there's a huge landslide area just below the town area. And over a period of time, I'm sure that landslide will slowly creep up towards the town. It's already doing that and affect the town. But the nature of the disaster is such that it is such a localized thing that the town people think that they're perfectly safe, and they are for some time. But in time to come, with the way the urbanization is taking place, the runoff and all these things, and the impact on the landslides, that landslide will surely affect the town. Compared to that, of course, earthquakes affect a large area. Landslides, the second point, are predictable to a large degree. In fact, a lot of work is being done on early warning about landslides, and I am also associated with one such project. On the contrary, earthquakes are not predictable at all. There are many triggering factors which are there. Rain. Most of the landslides in our area are caused totally by rain, and of course the human activity, which is also triggering a lot of the landslides. Whereas earthquakes, we do not know anything about them. Anything about them in the sense that the triggers, of course, in this area, we are due for a large, big earthquake. That's what the geologists tell us. But that is due to the tectonic movements and so on. But in terms of geology, that due might be today, it might be 200 years from now, but certainly this area is due for a large, big earthquake of the magnitude of 8+. The last point is that we can do a lot to landslides. We can manage the landslides to a major degree by just looking at the drainage and doing studies of zonation, also curtailing urbanization to areas which are unsafe, and so on. Whereas in earthquakes, there is precious little that we can do except raise awareness and perhaps make more resilient, earthquake-resilient structures. Next, please. And this is the type of rainfall which is taking place in Kalimpong and this area these days. On the left slide, you see the Teesta River during Cyclone Aila. 3 days of rainfall brought that much of rain and water into this area. And I took a photograph of from the same spot about 10 days later. And that is the river, which is the normal river. So you can see how much water is dumped by a storm or a peripheral of a storm. We normally lie on the peripheries of a storm. But what I would like to stress here is that the mountains are far more vulnerable to any sort of activity, whether it be climate change in terms of temperature and the impacts of that, or certainly rainfall, because what something's going on. But what happens is that in the plains, about 3,500 millimeters of rainfall, you can have nothing much, no major damage. As I could quote you an example of Air Force Station Hashimara, where I was posted. There, during the monsoons, 500 millimeters of rainfall overnight is not something unusual. But the drainage is good in the airfield, and so the water drains away, and there is no flooding, and therefore 500 millimeters of rainfall does nothing much to Hashimara. Whereas in the Darjeeling Sikkim Himalayas, we had 227 millimeters of rainfall in 2015, if I'm not wrong, 30th of June, and that 227 millimeters of rainfall overnight caused 40 deaths in this area. So that is the difference. Mountains are far more vulnerable, far more fragile to all these events. Next, please. Next. And this is the type of rainfall which is taking place. This is the rainfall of last year. We clock rainfall, we measure rainfall, and we keep a record of rainfall. That is one of the activities. If you see this, this is the rainfall of September 2020. And what happened was that in the 4 days that we have tabulated here, we received something like over 50% of the rainfall just within those 4 days. Siliguri had about 64% of the rainfall, monthly rainfall. The monthly rainfall is about 410 millimeters. And Siliguri had about 64% of that rainfall in those 4 days. And Kurseong, which is a town which is west of us, had more than 111.2 millimeters of the rainfall in just those 4 days. Kalimpong had about approximately half the rainfall, monthly rainfall in 4 days. Darjeeling had more than half the rainfall. So what happens is that this sort of rainfall does nothing good. This sort of rainfall is only destructive. It only creates problems for us. It neither recharges our aquifers, which is so badly needed, because all the Himalayas, despite being called the water towers, despite being called the third pole, and where the biggest entrap freshwater sources are, the entire Himalayas, as we know, are running critically short of fresh water. But this sort of rainfall does not help us in recharging the aquifers which are there. This type of rainfall only causes landslides. And that is the problem, that increasingly our rainfall is trending towards this type of rainfall, where we have major rainfall activity within 4 days, and the next 4 days it's absolutely dry. For that matter, from October last year, we had excess rainfall last year. Darjeeling, Sikkim, Himalaya had excess rainfall last year in the monsoon months. But thereafter, from October till now, we are almost bone dry. It's amazing. Our winter rains have not happened this year. Last year, we had quite a bit of winter rainfall. Winter rainfall is required for our winter crops. It also makes the forests green, so we don't have forest fire in April or March, April, when it's very dry and very warm. So this year, one of the problems perhaps we will face is forest fires, which Manipur is already facing. Next slide, please. And this is the GSI map, which comes out from whatever I've talked, the different types of rainfall, etc. And we in the Darjeeling Sikkim Himalayas are in the red zone. There is actually no categorization like in the earthquakes. So there are 5 categories, but in landslides there aren't, but this is the GSI map. GSI is the nodal agency for landslides. And we are categorized in the very high hazard area. That is Kalimpong, Darjeeling, and the Sikkim Himalayas. Right, next. And of course, this is the earthquake map. If we look at the earthquake that have gone past, the earthquakes which have taken place, then perhaps we are in zone 4. But as per a very well-known seismologist and a geologist, if we look at the earthquakes which are going to come, which are due, as I said, we are due for a major earthquake, then perhaps Darjeeling, Sikkim, Himalaya would be in zone 5. Because we are overdue for a major earthquake of the magnitude of 8 or more. Next, please. And that puts us in this thing where we are in a multi-hazard scenario, where one disaster form can trigger another. It has happened very recently in the Sikkim earthquake of 2011. We went through it in Kalimpong, and it triggered numerous landslides up in North Sikkim, which are still affecting that area. The moment that it rains a little bit, that whole area, that the landslides get reactivated, and North Sikkim gets blocked. North Sikkim access gets blocked because of the landslides which were activated during that earthquake. And where I'd like to bring out how people ask me, how did you start Save the Hills? And perhaps this photographs is where my interest in all this started. This was 1968 disaster, which is the mother of disasters, all disasters in the Darjeeling Sikkim Himalayas. We had tremendous amount of rainfall for 4 days in October, very late in the monsoons. Kalimpong had 750 millimeters of rainfall, and the rainfall figures are listed there. And if you have a look in any one of the, if you Google for it, you will come to know that this area had approximately, well, that's the figure which is written, 20,000 landslides. So that is where my interest started. I was a young college boy, and I experienced this disaster form from Kalimpong. I went around and looked at these landslides, many of these landslides, those days. And much later, next slide, please. Next slide. In September 2007, almost an exact similar thing happened, except that it stopped raining at the nick of time, and we were saved. But exactly almost the same thing, the same type of disaster we were heading for, as it was in 1968. This is a road on NH10, which was damaged during that time. And the damage was numerous. I've got the entire thing is tabulated on our blog, if you can have a look. In fact, I went around with my friends, and the devastation was so huge and so large that it was actually like a vision from hell. And that's why I named my blog, which is now 12 years old, has about 30, more than 3 lakh hits. The blog is called Visions of Hell. Next slide, please. And this is what the disaster management cycle is, half of it at least. And I'm afraid that despite everything, despite the Disaster Management Act, and despite those profound words by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh those days in the first Disaster Congress, where he said that there is a time for a paradigm shift, you know, those words, famous words. But despite that, I feel that personally, at the grassroots level, we are still managing the crisis. We are still relief-centric, we are still response-centric, and not enough focus is being done to the other part of disaster management. Please, next slide, please. Which is risk management, which should be our focus, and where we can do a lot to the risks which we are facing, rather than only try to manage the crisis. So that is what our focus has been, to a very, very limited degree. We do a lot of work on the awareness front, which is prevention, which is a preventive activity. So our work has over the years been a lot on the awareness, raising awareness in this whole area to the risks that we have, to the hazards that we have. And we have succeeded to a large measure. I'm glad to say so. Next, please. And this is the activities that we have had over the years. Of course, I've said that we've focused on raising awareness. We've had about 250 odd seminars at various levels, starting from the very grassroots village level till, well, I've had the privilege of talking in NIDM. So our talks have been wide. It has had a very good reception over the years. And we've had many workshops, seminars. We've produced 2 documentary films, one with ISRO. That documentary film is a very a preliminary a documentary film on landslides. And basically, it is meant for school children. And we've had it translated into Nepali, and we've distributed free to schools also. Then we have also talked on other relevant issues, that is the water shortage, the water crisis, the changing rainfall patterns, and many other environmental issues which affect the mountain areas. Other activity is also recording of rainfall, and we have our own rainfall gauges over the few towns in this area. We have one in Gangtok, we have one in Darjeeling, one in Kalimpong over my home, and one in Kurseong, and one in the plains of the Duars, where is the Jaldhaka area. And we have recorded rainfall activity over this area over the last 10 years. It's available freely on our blog to anybody who wants to use it. And yes, we do have a record of 10 years. Of course, 10 years rainfall activity record is nothing much, but then yes, as a small NGO, we have done that. We've also done a lot of work on recording the landslide activity. In fact, one of the reasons why Save the Hills was started was in my mind when we started it, was to show that this area is a very landslide prone area. And we used the blog extensively those days to show that this area is very landslide prone. And I'm glad to tell you that the blog has been very, very well read over the years, 3 lakh plus hits, and it is read every day all over the world. You can Google for it. In fact, it comes out very prominently on Google. Then, of course, we have tracked all major storms with the idea of providing some sort of early warning, because what happens is that a cyclone may form and head towards the coastline of Odisha. But being in the peripheral areas and being in the mountains, some effect will be there in the mountains. So it is better to be warned earlier about possible storms, etc. So we have assiduously logged these storms over the last maybe 10 years or so, and you'll find the details of these storms everywhere. We have also taken part in a lot of landslide surveys. We have done it alone, as well as with the Geological Survey of India. And then we have collaborated with a lot of organizations and educational institutions. We have worked with Colorado University extensively, where Professor Andrew Rumbach has written a paper on this area, the impact of urbanization on rural areas surrounding urban centers. That is the paper which Colorado University has produced, and we were with them. We also are working with Project Landslip. Project Landslip is a major international consortium working on early warning of landslides for a region. And they're working in 2 areas. One is in our area, and the other one is in the Nilgiris. And with the help of Project Landslip, there is an app available for landslide reporting. And also there is a paper format which is also available for anywhere. These are available free. Of course, we have collaborated with, we have worked with GSI and also with easy mode. Also, what we have focused on nowadays is a WhatsApp group. WhatsApp is a tremendous, tremendously powerful social media platform, which is used very, very much in India, not only by kids, but by very serious users as well as government offices. And we thought about 5 years back, we thought, why not use WhatsApp for hazard communication? And it has become a very widely used group. This group has been a very successful group in our area and the Darjeeling Sikkim Himalayas, where it has been crowdsourced information, where community participation has taken place, and we are very, very active, especially during the monsoons. Of course, now it is a lean season where we do not have so many disasters there, etc. But hazard alerts becomes very, very active during the monsoon season, where people are reporting on their own how much rainfall has taken place, where a landslide has taken place, which road is blocked, and so on and so forth. We have 227 members, out of which there are 25 odd PhDs who provide us the guidance, the knowledge, etc. And then we have a lot of media people who are also spreading the, 225 or 220 odd people in hazard alerts will not be sufficient to spread the news to all over the place. So the idea is that we should be able to spread this news all over the place, even to the grassroots level. And that's where the media platform comes in. And there are a lot of people, young reporters who help us in this. They are both in the print media as well as in the electronic media, and they help us with this. And the last particular activity which I have noted down there is working with the communities. Next, please. I hope I've got some time. Right. Okay, this is before I start my talk on the working with the communities. This is one of our landslide surveys which took place. This is a landslide area, and this was in October 2020 that we went and did this survey. A major landslide which has totally destroyed the Sacred Heart School, and the Sacred Heart School had to be demolished. It was a massive, huge school which is now no longer there. This was in Arubote in Darjeeling, in the Mane Bhanjang area. Next, please. And this was a landslide which I visited just a couple of days back. This is in Mungpel village in Kalimpong. And another major landslide which has ruined the future of an entire village called Mungpel village. The lower parts of the village are severely affected. The landslide is really, really huge. I don't think there is anything much that can be done to this landslide. There is, it costs too much. The only thing I think that is possible is relocation of these people before the next monsoons. Otherwise, it will become too hazardous and too dangerous for them. Next, please. Yes, this is where our focus should be for any NGO, that we should be working with the communities, because the community faces the brunt of any disaster. Of course, when a really big disaster comes, like the Nepal earthquake, or for that matter, even the earthquake in Sikkim, then you do have a lot of INGOs and the government agencies and very many agencies which are coming in and helping out in that thing. But when the catastrophe is much smaller and it takes place very often, as do the landslides. Landslide activity, thankfully, is not something huge. It takes place, I always say landslides nibble. They do not gnaw and chew things, they nibble. And that's why landslides are a very cunning form of disaster, where you actually don't know how many people are affected. But if you take an overall picture of how many people died due to landslides and why landslides are underreported, then you will come to know that landslides, the deaths due to landslides all over the world, rival or are more than the deaths in flood disasters, river flood disasters. This is a point which was brought out by a good friend of mine, Dr. David Petley, a world authority on landslides. Next, please. Right, you see here that this is a landslide which took place very close to my home years back, 2010. 3 young people, a mother and her 2 kids, died because of this. And there was hardly any rainfall. There was nothing much which could have triggered this rainfall, yet the landslide, but yet 3 people died. And this is where the human interference comes in, and which is a big, big factor in landslides these days. And you see here that you don't see any NDRF, certainly no NDRF. They never came. It was too small. No policeman, no fire brigade. You see the community only helping people. This was the morning when this landslide had taken place. I reached there about maybe an hour later. But the community is helping each other, and the entire disaster management thing at the local level should be based on this, in training these people how to overcome the wrath of nature or whatever the disaster is. Next, please. And this is some of our work which took place. So we were doing a small community-based CBDRM, as it's called, in my own place, where we held a lecture on how we could go around, helping ourselves. Because the crux of the matter is when something happens, most probably the initial impact will have to be handled by the community itself. Nobody will come. So it is better to be trained, be aware somehow, to be able to handle whatever is there coming, than to expect that there will be somebody who will be providing a lot of help. That may come, but at least for 3 days, as the experts say, the community must learn to survive on its own. So this was a part of our lecture which we were talking to these people, and of course we had the fire services there, whom we had invited to give a talk on fire to the women folk, especially because they are working in the kitchens, and that aspect where how do you extinguish a fire. So the fire people also were there giving a lecture separately. Next slide, please. And this is the type of map that we can sketch out, showing the red areas, which are the hazardous areas, which are the landslide prone areas, and which are perhaps which areas are relatively safe, which are the evacuation areas where we can take the people, who are the people to be, who are the most vulnerable people, the older people, the children, etc., where we could take them, which route to be followed, and so on. So this was a map which we were discussing in the last photograph which you saw. Next, please. This was another a small program which we did with another area. It was in Chibo, Pashur, and we had taken the help of the army to train young volunteers from that village in first aid, because when that disaster takes place, a landslide takes place, most probably there will be no trained worker there. So if you could train these people just to evacuate the people, give first aid, etc. And so you see a young man taking the BP of an army Jawan in the army hospital here. Next, please. And this is the thing that we emphasize, that this is a standard community-based thing which we talk about, where the community must be aware of what is happening. They must be aware of what are the risks involved, what are the hazards there, which are the vulnerable areas, which are the areas to be evacuated to. So, and therefore, after that, after being made aware of all those things, that community perhaps can then take the next step, which is to make a plan. The plan must be made at the family level first, where each family member knows what to do, where to go, whom to help, where the thing, and of course, then it must enlarge into the community plan. and then it must go into the, and this sort of thing should also be reflected in the district disaster management plan. Next. Next, please. Right. So this is something that we did that time, make a map, earmark the safe areas, population and the distribution, and what sort of early warning we could give. And remember that during a actual disaster, perhaps nothing will work. WhatsApp will not work, definitely. Power supply may suddenly go off, and so on. So how do we alert people if there is a landslide? So we were debating as to what is the best way of informing each other that there is a landslide, and perhaps we could bang electric poles or blow whistles or something like that, where we take a worst case scenario and work towards making a community safe. Right, next please. Right, I have finished my talk and I would welcome any questions. I hope I have not exceeded my time. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
So just one question. So if you could highlight how Save the Hills has been coping up during the pandemics, like during the phase of pandemics and COVID. So if you could just talk about that.
Can you hear me? Can you hear?
Yes.
Well, to be honest, Save the Hills, we did not do too much of work, except for a bit of awareness work in the initial stages where we had requested Dr. Kang from Delhi. She's a well-known virologist in Delhi, a person of international stature, where we invited her to talk, and we had her talk, and where she told us what COVID was, the various tests which are there, and how to stay safe, about masks, etc. So that is the type of work that we did initially. But I'm afraid that we did not do too much of work. It is slightly beyond our scope also, and we were more focused on. We have very, very limited resources. Let's face it. Thank you so much.
Now I would like to invite Prakash Bhattacharya, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Santa Bonta Foundation. Sir, am I audible to you, sir?
Yes, you are very much audible. Am I?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Am I?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Audible? Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I will be sharing the presentation.
Yeah, please. So hello to everyone, and this is Prakash Bhattacharya. So I'm the Chief Executive of the SG Foundation. So SG Foundation is a non-profit organization working mostly in Odisha, northern part of the Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and West Bengal. And since 2010, we are involving in mostly in the natural resource management part. So we are a group of people, group of engineer and soil moisture conservation people, mostly focused on. So next. Yeah, that I was told to you. We are working in 4 states now, in Odisha, West Bengal, and in Chhattisgarh recently. Next. So these all are our partners who are helping us to work. And these are the two key interventions we are working for. So mostly, as I say, that mostly we are working on natural resource management because we are the group of engineers. So our basic intervention is two types. One is the climate adaptation and another is the climate mitigation. In the climate adaptation part, we are working on watershed, horticulture, agriculture development, promoting climate resilient model, the model which is climate resilient in the hilly area, the renewable energy and the crop diversification. And within our climate mitigation program, we are trying to reduce the indoor black carbon footprint by promoting solar energy, by promoting improved cook stoves. And we are also monitoring it real-time monitor, and we are giving back the carbon credit to the women who are supporting the carbon footprint program and the disaster response. So we are not working on disaster response or disaster management since 2010. So since last year, when Fani came, after that we entered in the disaster. So we are not so much expert in disaster management since last Fani, and now in COVID we are also working on the disaster mitigation. Next. Next. Yeah. So it's a overall outreach or impact of SG Foundations means nearly 1.35 lakhs live we touched, and nearly 20,000 households we are covered. And as I said that we are working on a rejuvenate of uplands, and we mostly covered 3,400 acres of land. Next. And we are promoting orchards in nearly 3,000 acres, which gives the livelihood to the tribals only. And the watershed.
Sorry, sir. So, sorry to interrupt. So we are getting messages from the participants that if the presentation can be both in Hindi and English, because we have participants from different background. So I think thoda Hindi, thoda English, mix करके it will be better for them. Okay. Yeah. So continue.
हाँ, आप इसको next करते जाइए. So mostly our thematic area is the livelihood, renewable energy and NRM. जैसे कि अभी एक रिक्वेस्ट आया कि मैं ये बोलना चाहता हूँ कि एसडी फाउंडेशन जो कि 4 स्टेट में काम करता है, उसका मोस्टली वो काम करता है नेचुरल रिसोर्स मैनेजमेंट एंड रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी, which is the major thematic area is the livelihood, renewable energy and NRM. SG Foundation, since Fani came, before that हम लोग कभी काम नहीं कर रहे थे डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट में, बिकॉज हम लोग ज्यादातर फोकस कर रहे थे कि कैसे एनआरएम पे काम करें और एनआरएम बेस्ड लाइवलीहुड क्रिएट करें. So though I belongs from the coastal belt of Odisha, but we never been to coastal belt. So we are mostly focused in the tribal belt. So Fani का बाद after Fani हम लोग अभी डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट पे भी काम कर रहे हैं. नेक्स्ट. Next slide please. So you can see the all program, जो भी प्रोग्राम आप लोग देख रहे थे कि वो पूरा प्रोग्राम एनआरएम बेस्ड है और लाइवलीहुड बेस्ड है. तो जो आप अभी देख रहे थे, तो अभी हम लोग जैसे मैं बोल रहा था कि रिसेंटली हम लोग आफ्टर फनी हम लोग डिजास्टर मिटिगेशन पे काम शुरू किए हैं. सो हम लोग कैसे डिजास्टर को देखते हैं, हाउ मीन्स टू सी अ डिजास्टर देयर इज अ सोशल व्यू ऑफ डिजास्टर. सो इन द सोशल व्यू ये हमारा ग्रुप में हम लोग डिस्कशन किए कि इंटरेक्शन बिटवीन टू. एक सोशल व्यू बोलने से हम लोग को लगता है कि एक तो एक हजार्ड इवेंट्स है और एक इवेंट्स है जो कि वर्नरेबल ह्यूमन ग्रुप. So in the hazard events, we cannot work because we are not capable and we are not expert in the hazard events. because it's very natural. So SGF directly started work in disaster response since funny on a vulnerable human group. So we targeted the vulnerable human group to work on the socio and economic process. Next. Next. So these are some activities. So as I says कि vulnerable human group के साथ हम लोग जो काम कर रहे थे उसमें ज्यादातर सोशियो एंड इकोनॉमिक प्रोसेस पे हम लोग काम कर रहे थे. और ये जो काम है कुछ ग्लिम्स आपको मैं फोटोग्राफ्स दिखा रहा हूँ कि हम लोग सिर्फ रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी बेस्ड लाइवलीहुड, रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी बेस्ड.
सर या सर सो सॉरी सर, पार्टिसिपेंट्स बोल रहे हैं कि थोड़ा ऑडियो क्लियर नहीं है. तो सर आर यू यूजिंग हेडफोन्स और सर इधर यू कैन रिमूव द हेडफोन.
इट्स अ हेडफोन. इट्स अ हेडफोन.
हाँ सर बोल रहे हैं कि थोड़ा क्लियर नहीं है वो, हमारे ऑप्शंस में वो चैट में आ रहा है.
ओके.
सर वुड यू लाइक टू ट्राई विदाउट द हेडफोन्स?
ओके. Is it audible?
Yeah, this is better, sir.
Is it better?
Yes, sir.
So जो हम लोग जो आफ्टर फनी हम लोग इमीडिएटली एक्चुअली हम लोग कोस्टल एरिया में जहाँ मोस्टली इन द अर्बन स्लम्स हम लोग काम करते हैं इन द कटक डिस्ट्रिक्ट. So it is very nearer to the coastal belt and the sea level. So after Fani, we started immediately response on the solar energy. उनको कैसे हाउस होल्ड में कैसे हम लोग लाइटिंग दे सकते हैं, उनका एजुकेशन क्योंकि इमीडिएटली डिस्ट्रॉय हो चुका था वहाँ आपकी आंगनबाड़ी क्रेचेस, उसको कैसे हम लोग फिर बिल्ड कर सकते थे, स्ट्रीट लाइट कैसे प्रोवाइड कर सकते थे, उनका साथ हम लोग कैसे ड्रिंकिंग वाटर पे काम कर सकते थे. तो ये हम लोग सोचे कि ये हमारा अप्रोच रहे कि एवरीथिंग शुड बी पोर्टेबल एंड रिन्यूएबल. सो पोर्टेबल मीन्स आप ये देख रहे हैं कि एक आंगनबाड़ी सेंटर है, ये जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है हम उसको पूरा का पूरा जब कभी भी आफ्टर फनी वी स्टार्टेड इट, लेकिन हम लोग ये भी देख रहे हैं कि इसका बाद भी कभी फनी जैसा साइक्लोन आ सकता है तो क्या फिर कर सकते हैं कि ये भी क्या डिस्ट्रॉय हो जाएगा. इसलिए हमारा अप्रोच ये था कि हम लोग पोर्टेबल करें. वी कैन ये जो आंगनबाड़ी आप देख रहे हैं इसको हम लोग पूरा ऊपर लेके भी आ सकते हैं. कोई कभी भी साइक्लोन आएगा वी कैन फोल्ड इट, इसको पूरा फोल्ड कर सकते हैं हम, उसको फिर लाके कहीं भी एक ऊंचे जगह में रख सकते हैं, उसको रोड पे रख सकते हैं और कभी भी फिर ये स्टेबल हो जाएगा तो फिर हम लोग उसको फिर रीबिल्ड कर सकते हैं. तो हमारा एसजीएफ का ये अप्रोच है कि कोई भी सिस्टम जो है वहाँ जिसको हम लोग स्लम्स में लगा सकते हैं, यूज कर सकते हैं नॉर्मल टाइम में, और कभी आपका साइक्लोन वगैरह आया तो हम उसको फिर उठा के लेके रोड पे आ सकते हैं, अगेन रीबिल्ड इट इन द स्लम्स. नेक्स्ट. सेकेंडली कि वहाँ का जो लाइवलीहुड है स्लम्स में, जो लाइवलीहुड है उस लाइवलीहुड को हम लोग टारगेट किए अगेन विद द सोलर. लाइक आप देखते हैं कि स्विंग मशीन, कुछ लाइवलीहुड, कुछ लोग ऐसे भी हैं जो कि डिपेंड करते हैं स्लम्स में स्विंग मशीन पे, उनका लाइवलीहुड चलता है. तो हम लोग क्या किया, फिर उसका स्विंग मशीन डिस्ट्रॉय हो चुका था आपकी फनी में, तो हम लोग उसको सोलर एनर्जी बेस्ड, सोलर पावर बेस्ड ये स्विंग मशीन प्रोवाइड किया. उसका साइड में आप देख सकते हैं यहाँ कि आप एक ट्रॉली देखते हैं, सोलर ट्रॉली, क्योंकि जैसे कि मैं बोल रहा था कि हम लोग इसीलिए ट्रॉली किए कि उसको जब फिक्स कर देंगे तो वो फिर कभी साइक्लोन आएगा तो वो टूट सकता है या डिस्ट्रॉय हो सकता है. तो हम लोग क्या करते हैं कि सोलर का ट्रॉली बनाते हैं. वो सोलर ट्रॉली कोई भी डिवाइस का पास जाता है, उसको पावर देता है, फिर वो सोलर ट्रॉली को हम पैक्ड कर लेते हैं और वो हाइड्रोलिक है, तो फिर हम लोग उसको खींच के रास्ते के ऊपर ले आ सकते हैं, सेफ एरिया में ले सकते हैं. तो ऐसा ही उसका साइड में देखते हैं कि पॉप्ड राइस, कुछ है लोग जो कि उड़ीसा में पॉप्ड राइस खाने का उनका हैबिट है, तो यहाँ हम लोग एक पॉप्ड राइस का यूनिट देते हैं उनको, क्योंकि वो उनका लाइवलीहुड है और उनका फूड प्रैक्टिस भी है। उधर कुछ था जैसे कि आपकी काउस वगैरह, वो भी डिस्ट्रॉय हो चुका था, क्योंकि उन लोग ट्रेडिशनली मिल्किंग कर रहे थे, हम उनको सोलर मिल्किंग दे। कुछ लोगों का पोट्री एक उनका लाइवलीहुड था, उनको पोट्री व्हील भी दिए सोलर का, ड्रिंकिंग वाटर सोलर का दे रहे हैं। अब पास में देखते होंगे कि पानी पूरी और दही बड़ा एक जो कि बहुत फेमस है उड़ीसा में, पानी पूरी, तो बहुत लोगों का लाइवलीहुड है पानी पूरी, जो कि डिस्ट्रॉय हो चुका था। तो हम लोग उसको सोलर पावर ऑटोमेटिक पानी पूरी मशीन दे, उसको उनका कैसे रिजुविनेट हो सके उनका लाइवलीहुड। इस तरीके का हम लोग का कुछ इंटरवेंशन रहा, जो कि पूरा सोलर बेस्ड है और पोर्टेबल है। ये ख्याल रखना है कि ये पूरा पोर्टेबल है, सबको हम फिट कर सकते हैं, गांव में, बस्ती में, स्लम्स में। अगेन हम उसको ला सकते हैं ऊपर, रोड के ऊपर, और फिर रीबिल्ड कर सकते हैं। तो हमारा ज्यादातर काम रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी के एनर्जी बेस्ड है और पोर्टेबल है। नेक्स्ट। बस ये कुछ फोटोग्राफ्स है, जैसे कि कोविड रेस्पॉन्स, आफ्टर दैट कोविड में अभी हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं। जैसे कि कोविड में अगेन सोलर पावर कियोस्क हम लोग दे रहे हैं टू द म्युनिसिपैलिटी, टू द हॉस्पिटल्स, एंड कहीं भी पीडीएस सिस्टम चलता है जहां पब्लिक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सिस्टम काम करता है, वहां हम लोग सोलर पावर सैनिटाइजर देते हैं। इवन इफ सम ऑफ द हॉस्पिटल्स जहां लैब टेस्ट होता है, कोविड का लैब टेस्ट जहाँ होता है, वो कोविड का लैब टेस्ट, जैसे कि बड़ा हॉस्पिटल है उड़ीसा में एससीबी मेडिकल कॉलेज, हम लोग अभी एससीबी मेडिकल का जो लैब है उसको पूरा बड़ा सा लैब को हम लोग सोलर पावर कर रहे हैं। तो ये कोविड में हम लोग जैसे कि इमीडिएट चाहिए आपको फूड वगैरह, जो माइग्रेंट लेबरर्स थे और जो लेबरर्स स्लम्स का थे, जो काम करने के लिए नहीं जा पा रहे थे ड्यू टू कोविड, हम उसको नियरली 21 डेज तक एक फ्री डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन किचन हम लोग कम्युनिटी बेस्ड शुरू किए थे। उसका बाद हम लोग सोलर पावर सैनिटाइजर, सोलर पावर कियोस्क, सोलर पावर लैब हम लोग वहां शुरू किए हैं कटक में। नेक्स्ट। तो ये सबके लिए हमको ये था कि तो vulnerability जो है उसको हम अंडरस्टैंड करना है कि vulnerability क्या है, बिकॉज वी डोंट हैव एनी एक्सपर्टीज बिफोर दैट। सो हम पहले vulnerability को अंडरस्टैंड करने के लिए हम लोग देखें कि इसका दो साइड है, देयर इज टू साइड, वन इज एक्सटर्नल एंड वन इज द इंटरनल साइड। द एक्सटर्नल साइड्स में क्या होता है, नेचुरल हजार्ड्स आ जाते हैं जिसको हम कर नहीं सकते, वी आर नॉट कैपेबल टू डू। So that's why we focused on the internal side of the vulnerability, which refers to mostly resilience part. So in the resilience part, as you have focused on the internal sides refers to resilience, the community capacity building to resist and recover from the adverse impact of the disasters. Next. कम्युनिटी बेस्ड अप्रोच हमारा क्या था इन कटक स्लम्स? एक तो हम लोग वी एम्ड एट सोशल कॉन्शियसनेस एंड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन ऑफ डिजास्टर रिस्क रिडक्शन। एक था हमारा कि हम लोग कैसे उसको सोशियो इकोनॉमिक वल्नरेबिलिटी को कैसे रिड्यूस करें, टेक्नोलॉजी कैसे इंटरवीन करें, कि टेक्नोलॉजिकल इंटरवेंशन कैसा रहेगा। एक तो नेचुरल हजार्ड्स के लिए ट्रेजेडी उनका ऑलरेडी बिल्ट हो चुका है। Again, how to reduce the vulnerability and the tragedy? To reduce the tragedy, we intervene with the technology, that is renewable energy, because we would like to reduce the tragedy of the people, tragedy of the women, and the tragedy of the community. That's why we aimed at technology intervention, and we aim to apply local knowledge. जैसे कि स्लम्स में बहुत गांव से, बहुत फ्रॉम द वेरियस एरिया People are coming for their daily wages to the town, and our intervention is within the Cuttack town. ये क्या होता है, उसमें बहुत स्किल का आदमी रहते हैं, क्योंकि वो एक होमोजेनियस ग्रुप नहीं होते हैं. सो बहुत अलग अलग एरिया से वो माइग्रेट होते हैं टाउन को. इसीलिए हम लोग पहले आइडेंटिफाई कर रहे थे कि उनका लोकल नॉलेज क्या है, क्योंकि बहुत स्किल्ड लेबर वहां आते हैं जिनका कैपेसिटी, कितने लोगों का कैपेसिटी है कि अच्छा वो बोल सकते हैं, कैपेसिटी टू सीक कम्युनिटी एज एक्टिव पार्टिसिपेंट एंड डिसीजन मेकर्स. कुछ लोगों का स्किल्स बहुत अच्छा है, कुछ लोग अच्छा बोल सकते हैं. ऐसे उन लोगों को हम लोग एम कर रहे थे. एम टू एड्रेस मोस्टली इन रेस्पॉन्स एंड रिकवरी पार्ट आउट ऑफ डिफरेंट स्टेजेस ऑफ डिजास्टर cycle, like prevention, preparedness, mitigation, response and recovery. So mostly community को हम ये community को हम ऐसे एम कर रहे थे कि जो कि क्या क्या स्किल बेस्ड है, उनको कैसे हम आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे, उनको कैसे टेक्नोलॉजी इंटरवेंशन करेंगे और उनका कैसे सोशियो इकोनॉमिक वल्नरेबिलिटी को कैसे रिड्यूस करेंगे. ये था हमारा अप्रोच. नेक्स्ट. आप यहाँ देख सकते हैं कि कम्युनिटी को मैं डिवाइड किया हूँ कम्युनिटी, बिकॉज क्योंकि ये ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल विथ यूनिक शेयर्ड वैल्यू. जैसे मैं बोल रहा था कि टाउन एरिया में जो भी कम्युनिटी आता है वो हेट्रोजेनियस ग्रुप रहते हैं, क्योंकि ये वेरियस पार्ट ऑफ द उड़ीसा एंड आउट ऑफ द उड़ीसा पीपल आर कमिंग टू द कटक एंड दे आर स्टेड एट द स्लम्स एरिया. हम कम्युनिटी को एक साथ देख नहीं सकते, बिकॉज एक नजर में हम लोग देख नहीं सकते, because they are not the homogeneous group. Peoples have very good contact with peoples. There is some people who have the capacity and they have the capacity and the good contact with other peoples. So हमको ये लोगों को अलग करना है पहले. या हम उस कम्युनिटी में देखते हैं कि कुछ लोगों का मिशन विजन बहुत क्लियर है, कुछ लोगों का नेटवर्क बहुत क्लियर है, कुछ लोगों का आइडियाज बहुत अच्छा है, और कुछ उसी विद इन ए कम्युनिटी कुछ लोग ऐसे भी है कि बहुत इंफॉर्मेशन ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन में बहुत अच्छा है, आईटी में बहुत अच्छे हैं, कोलैबोरेशन में बहुत अच्छे हैं और रिलेशनशिप में बहुत अच्छे हैं. तो हम कम्युनिटी एज ए होल देख नहीं सकते इन कटक स्लम्स, क्योंकि वो वैरायटी लोग होते हैं, वैरायटी स्किल होता है. तो हम कम्युनिटी को एज ए होल इन ए होमोजेनियस ग्रुप देख नहीं सकते. ये हेट्रोजेनियस ग्रुप है, इसलिए हम उस कम्युनिटी को फिर अलग अलग डिवीजन में लेना है. हम लोग ले रहे हैं कि अलग अलग डिवीजन में उनका कैपेसिटी के उन एज देयर कैपेसिटी एंड द स्किल वी डिवाइडेड इन. कि कुछ लोगों का साथ अच्छा है तो उनको लेके क्या करना है, कुछ लोगों का नेटवर्क अच्छा है तो उस कम्युनिटी का साथ हम कैसे एड्रेस कर सकते हैं, कुछ लोगों का आइडिया बहुत अच्छा है तो उनका आइडिया कैसे हम लोग इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं हम इम्प्लीमेंट करने का टाइम में. तो कम्युनिटी एज ए होल हम देखते नहीं है, कम्युनिटी को हम डिवाइड करते हैं. एंड स्लम्स एज ए होल एक कम्युनिटी हम लोग ले सकते हैं जब डिजास्टर आता है, लेकिन जब हम रेस्पॉन्स करते हैं उसको हम स्पेसिफिक कम्युनिटी और स्किल वाइज हम उसको डिवीजन करते हैं. नेक्स्ट. तो एक था कि एक 4 स्टेप हम लोग ले रहे हैं. जैसे कि मैं बोल रहा था कि ये होमोजेनियस ग्रुप नहीं है, तो इसलिए हम लोग एक टाइम फिक्स करते थे कि कुछ लोग यहाँ हायर की सिस्टम बहुत ज्यादा हो जाता है. कुछ लोग हैं ट्राइबल्स, कुछ लोग हैं जनरल्स. जो जनरल लोग हैं जो कोस्टल बेल्ट की है वो भी स्लम्स में रहते हैं, लेकिन ये उनका हायर की बहुत ही ज्यादा है. वो बोलते हैं कि हम जनरल लोग हैं, तुम ट्राइबल हो, तुम एससी हो. तो हम लोग कुछ टाइम लेते हैं इन द फर्स्ट फेज टू रिड्यूस द हायरार्की, टू चेंज देयर बिहेवियर फर्स्ट. इन द सेकेंड फेज हम लोग पुल करते हैं, जैसे मैं लास्ट स्लाइड्स में दिखाया कि जो लोग हैं स्पेसिफिक लोग हैं उस हिसाब से हम पुल करते हैं. तो इमरजेंट कम्युनिटी कौन से लोग किसका साथ फिट होंगे, एससी का साथ एससी फिट हो सकता है, मिल्कमैन का साथ मिल्कमैन शायद फिट हो सकता है, स्किल लेवल का साथ शायद स्किल लेवल फिक्स हो सकता है। तो इस हिसाब से फर्स्ट हम कुछ टाइम लेते हैं, फेज 1 को हम बिहेवियर चेंज के लिए लेते हैं, सेकेंड फेज में हम लोग पुल करते हैं कम्युनिटी को, थर्ड में जो कम्युनिटी का साथ हम काम करते हैं कैसे वो ग्रो करें, यहाँ ये ज्यादा थर्ड फेज में हमारा ज्यादा इंटरवेंशन रहता है कि वो कैसे ग्रो करे। सेकेंडली और लास्टली हम उसका नेटवर्क बिल्ड करते हैं, कैसे वो ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन हो सकता है, वो पूरा कम्युनिटी कैसे ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन में जा सकता है। तो ये 4 फेज हम लोग ज्यादातर 4 फेज में बिलीव करते हैं कि बिहेवियर चेंज, पुल, ग्रो एंड ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, इसके लिए हम लोग बहुत टाइम देते हैं। नेक्स्ट, इन पार्टिसिपेटरी रिस्क मैनेजमेंट ज्यादातर क्या होता है कि हम लोग इसमें एनालाइज करते हैं वल्नरेबिलिटी को, हम लोग अंडरलाइन करते हैं सोशियो इकोनॉमिक वल्नरेबिलिटीज क्या है, we are assessing also community capability and resources। दो टाइप का चीज को हम लोग ज्यादातर असेस करते हैं कि वल्नरेबिलिटी क्या क्या है उनका, सोशियो इकोनॉमिक रेदर सोशियो इकोनॉमिक वल्नरेबिलिटी क्या है और हाउ वी कैन अंडरलाइन इट एंड हाउ वी कैन एड्रेस इट, एंड असेसिंग द कम्युनिटी कैपेबिलिटी। जैसे मैं बोल रहा था कि पॉप ड्राइस जब कुछ लोग हैं जो कि एक्सपर्ट हैं टू मेक द पॉप ड्राइस, हम उनको मशीनरी दे सकते हैं क्या? तो ये जो कैपेबिलिटी उनका है, उनका रिसोर्स का और कम्युनिटी कैपेबिलिटी जो है उनको हम असेस करते हैं फर्स्ट। नेक्स्ट, एक्सेस टू रिसोर्स में अगेन फाइनेंशियल रिसोर्सेस 2-3 टाइप का हम लोग का इंटरवेंशन रहता है या स्लम्स में। एक तो है कि पूरा का पूरा हम लोग फ्री दे सकें, या हम लोग कुछ क्रेडिट लिंक भी करेंगे, सेविंग भी करेंगे, इंश्योरेंस कैसे कर सकते हैं, लाइवलीहुड स्ट्रेटजी, एज ए लाइवलीहुड स्ट्रेटजी। जैसे कि हम लोग होम लाइटिंग करते हैं, होम लाइटिंग में भी वी आर सपोर्टिंग, जैसे कि मान लीजिए कि एक होम लाइटिंग, फैन और आपकी मोबाइल चार्जर, इसका कॉस्टिंग एक मैं एग्जांपल दे रहा हूँ कि एक उनका कॉस्टिंग है 12,000 रुपीज। वी आर नॉट सपोर्टिंग फुल, वी आर सपोर्टिंग पार्ट ऑफ दैट। 6,000 रुपीज हम लोग सपोर्ट किए, उसमें रियल टाइम मॉनिटर है, एज दे आर यूजिंग दे हैव टू पे, तो another 6,000 they have to pay। लेकिन उन लोग कैसे पे करेंगे, क्योंकि एक तो फनी आया, फिर कोविड आ गया, तो वो पे फिर कैसे करेंगे? तो हम लोग देखते हैं कि कैसे उनको लिंक किया जाए, क्रेडिट लिंक हो सकता है क्या, वहाँ कुछ मोबिलाइजेशन हो सकता है क्या? तो हम लोग जैसे कि वहाँ का जो कटक म्यूनिसिपैलिटी को मोबिलाइज किया, रोटरी को मोबिलाइज किया, सेल्को फाउंडेशन को मोबिलाइज किया, तो हम कुछ ग्रांट बेस्ड मोबिलाइजेशन करते हैं और कुछ लोगों का साथ डायरेक्टली क्रेडिट लिंक पे भी काम करते हैं। इसलिए हम रिसोर्स को भी एक्सेस करने के लिए और एसेट बिल्डिंग करने के लिए ये एसेस हम करते हैं कि रिसोर्स कहाँ से आ सकता है, लोग कितना कंट्रीब्यूट कर सकते हैं, और अदर एजेंसी हाउ मच दे कैन कंट्रीब्यूट। लाइक सोशल प्रोटेक्शन पे, जैसे कि फूड प्रोग्राम, कम्युनिटी हाउसिंग, तो ये सोशल प्रोटेक्शन में भी फूड प्रोग्राम के लिए हम लोग CSR से सपोर्ट ले रहे थे कि कैसे ये फूड प्रोग्राम हम लोग कैसे बिल्ड कर सकते हैं। कम्युनिटी हाउसिंग जैसे क्रेच हो या आंगनबाड़ी हो, सेल्को और आपकी CMC, ये दोनों को हम लोग अप्रोच कर रहे थे, इवन रोटरी, और कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ कम्युनिटी नेटवर्क। कम्युनिटी नेटवर्क में ज्यादातर हम लोग काम कर रहे थे टू सपोर्ट द मिटिगेशन इनिशिएटिव्स, इंफॉर्मेशन शेयरिंग, इसके लिए हम लोग डायरेक्टली काम कर रहे थे। हमारा जो कलीग्स हैं उन लोग डायरेक्टली काम करते हैं मोस्टली इन कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ कम्युनिटी नेटवर्क्स। सो ये 3 टाइप का असेस हम लोग करते हैं, फाइनेंशियल रिसोर्सेज, सोशल प्रोटेक्शन का काम और कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ कम्युनिटी नेटवर्क्स। ये तीनों का असेस करने के बाद हम लोग फिर प्रोग्राम के लिए जा रहे हैं। नेक्स्ट, तो यही है कि जैसे मैं बोल रहा था कि हम लोग we are very new to disaster management. We are now learning, but again, since funny and followed by COVID, our approach of intervention is like this. Though we are specialized in the natural resource management, still now we are trying to manage some disaster and involve ourselves with the community to reduce the drudgery from the disaster. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So before we head to the next session, just few questions like, so why is SGF working with the tribals? Because often the tribals are always considered to be of backward nature, which is definitely a stereotyping. Then why is SGF working with the tribals? And second question would be, so what issues SGF faced during the pandemic, because everything went into lockdown. So if you could highlight on these two topics, sir.
Now, so one, why we are working with the tribals. So if you see, means Odisha is a tribal state, you can say. So mostly out of 30 districts, more than 20 districts is the tribal districts, and they are the major vulnerable group, because a vulnerable group means and we are focusing the natural resource management part. Our domain is the natural resource management. तो हम इसलिए ज्यादा फोकस करते हैं ट्राइबल लोगों को, क्योंकि ज्यादा वनरेबिलिटी ट्राइबल लोगों के साथ है, और सेकंड हमारा एक्सपर्टी ज्यादातर लैंड, इरिगेशन, एग्रीकल्चर, सॉइल मॉइस्चर कंजर्वेशन ये है, और हमारा जो एक्सपीरियंस भी ज्यादातर है वो ट्राइबल एरियाज में ही हमारा एक्सपीरियंस है. सो एक बोल सकते हैं कि एक तो है वनरेबिलिटी, दूसरा ये है कि हमारा इंटरेस्ट खुद का एसजी फाउंडेशन का जो इंटरेस्ट एरिया वो ट्राइबल लोगों के साथ काम करने का है. थर्ड हमारा एक्सपर्टी, और जो ग्रुप एसजी फाउंडेशन का है ज्यादातर ग्रुप मीन्स हाइड्रोलॉजी पे ज्यादा काम करते हैं, वाटर सेट में ज्यादा काम करते हैं. सो वी आर वेरी मच इंटरेस्टेड टू वर्क विथ ट्राइबल. और मेरा जो एक्सपीरियंस रहा, क्योंकि ये मेरा पर्सनल इंटरेस्ट भी एक है कि सिंस 90s मेरा इन्वॉल्वमेंट सिर्फ ट्राइबल के साथ है. मैं सिर्फ ट्राइबल एरियाज में ही काम करता हूँ, तो इसीलिए शायद हम लोग थोड़ा ज्यादा प्री ओरिएंटेड है टू वर्क विद द ट्राइबल्स. एक है. सेकंड क्वेश्चन आपका क्या था कि इस पेंडेमिक टाइम में हमारा एक्सपीरियंस कैसा था. तो ये पेंडेमिक टाइम में दो टाइप का था. एक पेंडेमिक टाइम दो टाइप का था. एक तो है वी आर ऑल्सो वनरेबल दैट टाइम, बिकॉज हम लोग 4 स्टेट में काम करते थे, और चारों स्टेट में हमारा खुद का स्टाफ, खुद का जो कलीग्स है, मेंबर्स है, हम खुद वनरेबल थे. हम कहीं जा नहीं पा रहे थे. ये एक पहला डिफिकल्टीज ये था कि हाउ वी कैन अप्रोच द पीपल, बिकॉज वी आर ऑल्सो अरेस्टेड विद इन द हाउस. और ज्यादातर उड़ीसा में स्कोप नहीं था फर्स्ट 3 to 4 months 3 months कि आपको बाहर जाने के लिए, कहीं भी नहीं था. लेकिन यहाँ ज्यादातर अलाउ नहीं कर रहे थे कोविड के टाइम में. तो ये एक बड़ा चैलेंज था कि हम लोग जितना मैक्सिमम स्टाफ को हमको छुट्टी देना पड़ा. और एक तरफ हम एनआरएम में काम करते हैं जहाँ प्लांटेशन हमारा फोकस्ड है, हॉर्टिकल्चर पे काम करते हैं, एग्रीकल्चर में काम करते हैं, लेकिन एग्रीकल्चर जो वेरी टाइम बाउंड, हॉर्टिकल्चर जो कि बहुत टाइम बाउंड का काम है, और उनको डेली बेसिस पे हमको मॉनिटर करना है. लेकिन ये चैलेंजेस हमारा था कि हमको लेबर नहीं मिल रहा था, हम खुद नहीं जा पा रहे थे फील्ड को. आप इमेजिन करिए कि 3000 एकर्स ऑफ हॉर्टिकल्चर वी आर प्रोमोटिंग फॉर द ट्राइबल्स. 3000 एकड़ का हॉर्टिकल्चर प्लांट जो प्रोमोट कर रहा है, उसको एवरी डे वी हैव टू फोकस, एवरी डे वी हैव टू टच द फील्ड. हमको जाना ही चाहिए, हमको जाना है और लेबर को जाना है, लेकिन दोनों ही हम लोग जा नहीं पाए. इसलिए एक मेजर चैलेंज ये था हमारा प्रोग्राम के लिए कि पहले हमारा प्रोग्राम भी बहुत डिजास्टर हो गया इस टाइम में, क्योंकि ये भी ट्राइबल एरिया में आपकी एलिफेंट प्रोन एरिया है। उस टाइम में हम लोग जब जा नहीं पाए तो एलिफेंट वगैरह बहुत डिस्ट्रॉय किया हमारा प्रोग्राम को। ये रहा हमारा प्रोग्राम। सेकंड जो मोस्ट वनरेबल ये था कि जो ट्राइबल लोग माइग्रेंट थे, एनआरईजीए में उनको काम नहीं मिला फास्ट। जो हमारा एरिया से जिन लोग माइग्रेंट थे वो वेरियस स्किल का थे, जैसे कि केवंझर का कोई यहाँ का माइग्रेंट लेबर जो बाहर जाके मध्य प्रदेश में काम कर रहा था, वो तो डायमंड पॉलिशिंग में काम कर रहा था। जब वो वापस आया केवंझर को, उड़ीसा को, यहाँ उसके लिए उसका स्किल के हिसाब से काम नहीं मिला। वो डायमंड पॉलिश कर रहा था, यहाँ गवर्नमेंट ने बोला कि उसको एनआरजीए का काम दे दो। तो फिर जब एनआरजीए के लिए वो गया तो काम नहीं कर पाया। अगेन देयर वाज ए स्कोप ऑफ डेली वेजेस, लेकिन वो उसके लिए स्किल नहीं था। वो मुंबई जा रहा था कुछ अलग काम के लिए, वो गुजरात जा रहा था, सूरत जा रहा था वो वीविंग के लिए, लेकिन यहाँ हमारा वीविंग का स्कोप नहीं है। तो ये मेजर चैलेंज ये था कि जब कोई भी माइग्रेंट लेबर हमारा एरिया में वापस आ रहा था, हम उनको काम नहीं दे पा रहे थे। हम सिर्फ काम दे रहे हैं कि एनआरजीए में, वो एनआरजीए में काम नहीं कर रहा था बिकॉज ही इज नॉट स्किल एनफ। वो स्किल था वीविंग में, वो स्किल था पॉलिशिंग, डायमंड पॉलिशिंग में, वो स्किल था ब्रोंज पॉलिशिंग में, स्टोन कार्विंग में, जो यहाँ ये अपॉर्चुनिटीज नहीं था जो ट्राइबल एरिया में। तो ट्राइबल एरिया में ज्यादातर कोविड एरिया में, कोविड का टाइम में ज्यादा चैलेंजेस हमारा जो टारगेट लोग हैं जिनका साथ हम काम करते हैं, मोस्टली 20,000 हाउस होल्ड्स, उनका साथ बहुत ही तकलीफ हुआ। हम उनको कैसे फेस दिखाते हैं, वो हमको काम मांगने लगे, लेकिन वी कैनॉट एफोर्ड देम द जॉब, excluding the agriculture and the soil conservation work, वो प्रिफर नहीं कर रहे थे। और जब हम लोग टारगेट कर रहे थे जब कोस्टल बेल्ट को, क्योंकि फनी का टाइम, आफ्टर फनी हम लोग कोस्टल बेल्ट में भी काम किए, तब क्या हुआ कोविड में कि वहां उनका स्किल पे काम नहीं था, क्योंकि दे ऑल मैक्सिमम पीपल आर द स्किल्ड लेबर, ऑल आर द स्किल्ड लेबर आई कैन से, क्योंकि वो स्किल्ड हैं इसलिए टाउनशिप अरमान में जाके वो स्लम्स में रहते हैं। तो मेजर चैलेंजेस ये था कि उनको हम काम नहीं दे पाया, बस हम उनको अटेंड भी नहीं कर पाया। लेकिन कुछ एरियाज में आफ्टर कोविड का टाइम में हम लोग जब कोविड रेस्पॉन्स पे काम शुरू किए, जहां हम लोग रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी पे जहां हम लोग काम कर रहे थे लाइवलीहुड में, उनका साथ हम अच्छा काम कर पाए। बिकॉज जैसे कि मिल्किंग, जिसका पास मिल्किंग मशीन था वो उस टाइम में काम किया है, जिसका पास पोट्री व्हील था वो काम किया है। मतलब द पीपल जिनका साथ हम लोग रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी पे काम कर रहे थे, लाइवलीहुड पे काम कर रहे थे, सोलर बेस्ड, सोलर पावर लाइवलीहुड का काम कर रहे थे, उन लोग का साथ अच्छा काम हुआ। जिनका साथ एग्रीकल्चर हॉर्टिकल्चर में काम कर रहे थे उनका साथ इतना अच्छा काम हो नहीं पाया, क्योंकि ये बहुत रिस्ट्रिक्शन था। तो ये दो टाइप का चैलेंजेस हमको फेस करना पड़ा। एक तो हमारा इंटरनल, जो कि हमारा विद इन आवर स्टाफ, विद इन आवर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, और एक था जो कि वेरी नेचुरल, जैसे एक्सटर्नल वल्नरेबिलिटी। ये दोनों पे हम लोग बहुत ज्यादा फेस किए प्रॉब्लम। और कुछ था आराधना?
हाँ जी सर, थैंक यू सो मच सर, ये बहुत इंफॉर्मेटिव था। एंड आई थिंक जो ये करंट पैंडेमिक रहा है फॉर लॉट ऑफ आवर जनरेशन, शायद हमारे लिए इस लेवल का पैंडेमिक इज ऑल न्यू, तो इसके लर्निंग्स भी आई थिंक हमारे लिए बहुत काम आएंगे। स्पेशली आई वाज रीडिंग समथिंग अबाउट अम्फन एंड हाउ एक तरफ हम पैंडेमिक को डील करने के लिए बात कर रहे हैं सोशल डिस्टेंसिंग की, एंड दूसरी तरफ रिलीफ के टाइम पे इट बिकेम अ कंसर्न इन वेस्ट बंगाल वेयर आप लोगों को रिलीफ कैंप्स में रख रहे हैं, हाउ टू मेंटेन दैट बेसिक हेल्थ हाइजीन व्हिच वाज सो इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर टेकिंग केयर ऑफ द पैंडेमिक्स आल्सो। सर एक दो क्वेश्चंस और हैं। one question which I'll put across to both of you. Praful sir, if sir is around, and Biswa Prakash sir ji, आपके लिए भी. एक ही क्वेश्चन है पार्टिसिपेंट का, वो ये जानना चाह रहे हैं कि आप जिन एरियाज में काम करते हैं तो वहां पे कम्युनिटी लेवल पे अर्ली वार्निंग के सिग्नल्स को किस तरीके से यूजिंग द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ कम्युनिटी एम्पावरमेंट दिया जा सकता है या दे रहे हैं, या इस टाइप का कुछ चैलेंजेस हैं या आप कर पा रहे हैं, तो किस तरीके से अगर आप डील कर रहे हैं इस एरिया में अर्ली वार्निंग से के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में? जी, इट्स टू बोथ ऑफ यू सर।
हम लोग उस पर काम नहीं करते हैं, बिकॉज मैं ये बोल रहा था कि हम लोग पहले कि हम लोग ज्यादातर काम करते हैं इंटरनल साइट्स, एक्सटर्नल साइट्स में हम लोग कुछ काम नहीं करते बिकॉज वी आर नॉट एक्सपर्ट इन इट। जब आफ्टर फनी हमारा इंटरवेंशन था, बिफोर फनी या बिफोर एनी साइक्लोन हमारा एक्सपर्टी नहीं है कि कैसे हम वार्न करें, तो मेरा भी नॉलेज नहीं है कि उन लोग कैसे वार्न होते हैं, तो मेरा काम कुछ नहीं है वार्निंग पे। मेरा काम ज्यादातर है कि हम कैसे उसको मिटिगेट कर सकते हैं, रेजिलियंस के ऊपर ज्यादा कैसे काम कर सकते हैं ऑन रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी।
No worries, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, are you around? हाँ जी, sir.
Yeah, very much. Can I talk?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Ma'am, regarding early warning, we have been looking into this for some time now. You see, early warning, I'm talking specifically about a mountainous area, but then I think it applies to the plains also. In terms of, say, rainfall, I'm talking specifically about rainfall, hydrological disasters. One, the warnings do come in abundance to the district authorities and to the BDO or to the GP level. What often happens is that this stays there. I may be wrong, but I think it does not reach the communities. So, in a bid to circumvent that, what we have done is formed this group called Hazard Alerts, where we have, I said, it's a WhatsApp group, and it's we are just making use of digital technology and ICT, information communication technology, where we have a tremendous tool in our hands, where we can take this warning. This warning, which we take and put in hazard alerts, is not something which we have manufactured. It is from some agency which is renowned. It is time tested. It is most probably a government agency, something like the IMHA or some other thing like this, where we take this warning from there and put it in the hazard alerts group, and therefore thereafter it gets filtered down to the community at various levels. What we do, what I said was, we have a lot of NGOs and they have their own communication system within the NGO. So we have found that this method of using this social media tool is excellent for filtering the early warning messages down. And there is no shortage of excellent early warning information which is available on the net. For example, any major cyclone or storm which comes up in the Bay of Bengal, you will certainly get at least about a week's notice. The event is reported either in IMHD or it is reported in so many other websites where you can track these things from the time that it forms a low pressure till the time then it becomes a depression, then a deep depression, and then becomes a cyclone, and then perhaps a whatever the category of the cyclone. But this movement and this information is available on the net these days. This is the amazing part of technology, that why aren't we using this? That this information is available. What we are doing is just taking that information, putting it in a manner which is understandable, and giving it to the community. So this can be done at every place. And that's what we strongly advise. We are not manufacturing this information. This information, and to that extent, if there is any requirement for any explanation, any clarification, we do have very qualified people in hazard alerts. We have met a friend of mine who's a meteorological officer and very experienced meteorological officer who is directly commenting on any information which is there. There is, as I said, a seismologist who could give his comments on any. So, and also over a period of time, I'm very proud to say that hazard alerts has become a very disciplined group where we do not exchange, frivolous stuff like greetings and jokes and all. It is confined to what we are supposed to be doing. So this, I found, is an excellent tool where we can use information communication technology and very many other platforms which are there, whether it is Instagram or whether it is Facebook or something. If people want to use it, it can be used very, very well. Of course, the only problem is that in an actual disaster, when we have a major disaster, most probably due to communications lines going down, towers not working, servers going down, etc., these things won't work. But then at least till that time, we have an excellent communication tool.
Thank you so much, sir. Maybe, it's important to replicate such local level mechanisms, like something like the hazard alert group that you've mentioned for different communities in different areas. So there's one more question. I'll just rephrase it a bit. So the participant says that, we have a plethora of different local level organizations, different stakeholders, if I may say so, like health centers, Anganwadis, schools, panchayats, civil organizations. And they all play a pivotal role, right? Especially in the response or management aspect. So how do you see it as easy or difficult or challenging to unite such local organizations, to be on the same maybe platform when you're working or dealing with a disaster situation? Any example or anything? Both of you.
In my experience, there has been an experiment towards this in the formation of the interagency group in West Bengal. I don't know whether this is there in any other state, but the interagency group was formed precisely because of this after Cyclone Ayla, where there was a plethora of NGOs or groups rushing towards one particular area, and there were none going to another area, and there was confusion, which is bound to happen in any disaster scenario where communications are down and the fog of war sort of thing sets in. But the IAG is an attempt from the West Bengal government to exactly form this sort of thing where there is a central agency where, they take details of NGOs, and I'm not sure whether they are, of course, they are working with the government of West Bengal Disaster Management Department also. But this is an attempt towards that end to sort of find a way of getting the work done in a more organized and a regulated manner, rather than having people. But we have a long way to go. For example, ma'am, if I may say, I'll give you a very small example. We keep saying that there is no rainfall data or no rainfall. There's a absolute what you call a shortage of rainfall instruments, automatic weather stations, etc. This is absolutely bogus. There is no shortage of automatic weather instruments, rainfall gauges, rainfall readings all over the country. Each department, for example, government department, has scores of it. The forest department, the sericulture department, the agriculture department, the dams, the roads, everybody has these instruments which are there, but the readings which are there are all closeted. They are kept as if they are nuclear secrets, And to get rainfall data is almost an impossible task. One has to first write an application. That application goes through n number of files, then it lands up at the Babu's table, and so on. That's why we formed our own network of rainfall gauges, because it is almost impossible to get rainfall gauges, rainfall data for a landslide which might occur.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. One last question before we invite our next speaker. Not sure, Praful sir and Biswa Prakash sir, if you are aware of it or you may like to answer it. For Odisha and West Bengal, so do you have a disaster management plan integrated with the Gram Panchayat development plans? I mean, I do not know if it's still happening in your respective states yet or not.
I don't have any idea.
Neither me. I don't want to comment on this.
All right, sir. So, you know what, if I can just add to it, not aware about West Bengal and Odisha yet, but the 2018 guidelines for the Gram Panchayat development plans has actually made it mandatory that for each GPDP-led disaster management plans be integrated. So I suppose for a lot of states, it's only a very beginning. We have worked with UP, Himachal, Telangana, Andhra, Sikkim. So these are a couple of states which I'm aware of, which have already started the initiatives, but maybe we can get back to you. Maybe Aradhana and I will, inform the participants about what is the current status of this in West Bengal and Odisha. Thank you so much. Over to you, Aradhana. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Firstly, I would like to thank the speakers of the session, both Praful Rao sir as well as Bapi ji for their presentation, and also highlighting various subjects which are very sensitive in nature. Moving ahead with the session, we have Mr. Gokul Halan, who is from Keystone Foundation. So over.
Thanks, Aradhana. First of all, I would like to thank the National Institute of Disaster Management for giving me this opportunity to present to your students. And I'm also really honored to be part of this panelists, especially the experienced Praful Rao and Biswa Prakash ji. It's amazing to hear their insights from the kind of work that they've done around Odisha and in the Darjeeling region. So my presentation, let me first share my presentation.
Gokulji, mix of Hindi and English, please.
Sorry, I don't speak Hindi, but if English is fine, I'll just do it again.
Okay, go ahead.
Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So I've titled it The Ecological Imbalance and Natural Disasters in the Nilgiris. So this is going to be more like a storytelling presentation. I've not really put so much of charts and other things into it, but I'll just give you a brief background as to what we are doing here in the Nilgiris. So first of all, I will discuss a lot about the historical land use changes and the kind of impact that it has had on the community, the local ecology, the hydrology, and water. And some of these paintings are from one of the artists, local artists here, Gokul Gowder, and some photographs are also from Mr. Raghu Johi. I'll use it here. So this is how Nilgiris originally used to look. If you look at the photo here, it used to be just a lot of grasslands and some amount of forests in the valleys where you see, on the mountain folds. So this used to be the major landscape, the land pattern, like the land use pattern in the district itself. So and you can see that the habitations were somewhere around the mountain folds or somewhere in the shoulder of the mountain, and different communities chose different slopes to kind of settle, and their livelihoods, their culture, their ecology, everything kind of revolved around it. And this used to be a village setup. They had some amount of farming. A lot of the communities were pastoralists, and they were using those grasslands. You see that why important grasslands were for these communities. And they practice some amount of traditional agriculture in these slopes. And then you see water and buffaloes were kind of very important. They were nature worshippers, And a lot of their rituals, all of these kind of revolved around conservation of nature, and the daily lives also kind of meant that they respect and live around with the nature that they had. And like what I said, yeah, they also worship water, they worship forests, they worship rocks, and that's how the tribal life used to be here in the Nilgiris. And they had a strong community governance. The local governance was quite strong in the region, and communities made decisions together. They planned together. They kind of had a very good a kind of understanding which took them for a very long time in this region. So then we have the entry of the British in the Nilgiris. This was in the 1800s initially. And once they entered and they saw that these mountains were, just a replica of their home back in England, they wanted to kind of, set up their summer camp up in the hills. And that is when they saw that these lands, these mountains were just grasslands. And for them, it looked like it was more like wastelands, So what the communities, enjoyed and kind of, structure their entire life line around. For them, for the Britishers, it looked more like a wasteland. So even today, in the government records, a lot of the Nilgiris grasslands and wetlands still fall into wasteland category. So, which is something that is very important when I'm going to talk about natural disasters in the coming slides. So today, this is how Nilgiris looks. A lot of our grasslands are taken over by eucalyptus and wattle, which are invasive species from Australia and abroad. And this has spread extensively across the Nilgiris. The entire mountaintops are covered with eucalyptus and and acacia and other kind of plantation crops right now. And introduction of tea has also converted multiple acres of land into tea itself. It's just mountains and mountains of tea, and there is no biodiversity in these region at all. When the tourists, especially tourists, come into the Nilgiris, they feel that there is so much green, these people should be living a good life. But for the local people here, and especially for the environmentalists, we just call these as green deserts. It's just mountains of green tea. And a lot of the valley, which used to be wetlands, have now been converted into agriculture zones, which is pumped with tons and tons of chemicals. And on the right last, you see the picture of urbanization in the Nilgiris. It's really high. The small towns have grown really high, big in size. It's a concrete jungle, to be really honest. The pace at which it is kind of growing right now, it's a major threat to kind of local ecology, as well as in terms of the natural disasters that's occurring in the region. And like I said, the agriculture also, it means it's not the native agriculture anymore. It's all English and Chinese vegetable that's being grown here just for the market. And it has not just been here in the valley now, it's slowly moving up the slopes, which are vulnerable to landslides, like we are going to discuss. And waste is another major issue. I will talk about waste a little bit and how it is linked to kind of, flooding in the region. To show you the population growth in the Nilgiris, right from 1901, if you see the decadal population growth, we have grown from less than 1 lakh to close to 7 lakhs today. And Nilgiris is the only district which has seen a negative population growth in 2011 census. There is a lot of out-migration. The communities are leaving out of the landscape. At the same time, there is some amount of in-migration. A lot of tourists and outsiders who come into the Nilgiris are buying plots of lands and trying to settle in here. And if you look at the urbanization rate here, you can see that Nilgiris, which is close to 70% forests earlier, is today 60% urban. So this is the kind of impact that you see that, due to mass tourism in the region. And some of the taluks like Gudalur and Uti and Kunur, they have major urbanization rates, close to 82% urbanization, and Gudalur has close to 92% urbanization. And most of the communities are kind of, moving towards these urban towns, and urban towns are again kind of are in the valleys, or sometimes it's a mix of both the valleys and the slopes in the hills. And tourism trends, to just give you a look into the tourism trends, you see that we have close to 3.5 million people visiting the Nilgiris every year. And this pressure also is directly kind of impacts the local ecology and the kind of infrastructure that is needed to support this kind of tourism in the region. And a lot of road building, a lot of in terms of extracting resources, in terms of guest houses, second houses, and all those things. All of these are kind of having a very negative impact on the local ecology here. And the rainfall in the region. If you look at the rainfall, Nilgiris has close to 2000 mm average, but it's really been difficult to draw a trend and say that, okay, this is how the Nilgiris weather has been, or the rainfall trend has been, in terms of saying, okay, 4 years of good rainfall, we have a drought year. It has been really difficult to say for the Nilgiris because it's been really erratic. Every year has a different kind of model, and each of these years have kind of had some amount of had impacted the local ecology in some way, and there has been some events of landslides recorded in the region. So some problem statements that I have tried to just list down. From GSI report, we understand that 70% of the native forests in the Nilgiris were destroyed for starting tea and other plantations, and to start vegetable cultivation in the region. And 10% or more was denuded for residential purposes. So you see that already 80% of the land use in the Nilgiris has already been converted to some other uses, and today that's having a very negative impact on the region as a whole. And the vulnerable locations as mapped by GSI in 2001 was 110. Sorry, in 2010 was 101 locations. And today in 2019, we see that we have 300 locations which is vulnerable to landslides just across the district. So the kind of vulnerability that that the region kind of experiences is really high. And just giving you a background as to why it is important for Keystone Foundation to work in this. So Keystone Foundation as an organization, when you see, so this is kind of like a organization structure. We have directors who started this. We have 3 founder directors who kind of started working on apiculture. That was the core objective of Keystone Foundation when it first started in the Nilgiris, and look at honeybees and tribals who are kind of dependent on honey hunting for their livelihoods. Then slowly started to understand that this region has a lot more problems than just pollination on honey and other all of these issues, but to look at it holistically. That's how we have 12 program thematic areas today, which starts with apiculture, and also it works on climate change resilience, water and sanitation. We have health. We have work on community, community-led, local governance. We have community. We work on Forest Rights Act. We work on their livelihoods, and we work on and many more other things. Slowly, to just give you and how it is linked. So these are some major components on the top that you see, and how do we link through this. So we have close to 12 thematic program areas. Like I said, it's all linked to one another, and we try to it is all interconnected and interlinked. Is also linked to biodiversity and restoration, and it's also linked to community well-being and their health. And there is some amount of field courses and research. We do a lot of networking. We do work on climate change, and we start developing resilience units within the districts. And we have a lot of advocacy and media, where we do a lot of outreach programs within the region. We have an active organization development program which looks at the finance, does a lot of field area administration. We have human resources team. We have a lot to do with infrastructure and keeping them in place, and also legal team. We have a fundraising team and communications team. This is a broad program structure from Keystone Foundation, and we all work as different teams, but kind of try to interlink and see how each program area kind of has a connection with one another. So apart from that, Keystone Foundation has incubated 3 other organizations which we share a campus with. We have a producer company which is run by communities itself. It's called the Adimalai Producer Company. We have Last Forest Enterprises, which is a marketing wing, which helps Adimalai in selling some of their organic produces and forest value-added products in the market. And we have a Nilgiri Natural History Society, which works on outreach, which takes the work that we do to the common citizens and the fellow folks in the region who are interested in this kind of work. And going to our study area. So we are here in India. We are in the Tamil Nadu state, and Nilgiris is in the westmost corner of the state. The Nilgiris is part of the ecosensitive zone, which is called the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, which was the first declared Manan Biosphere Reserve in the country under the Manan Biosphere program. And it links the Eastern Ghats with the Western Ghats. It's in the junction. So so you know that this area particularly is very ecosensitive in its nature. So our work has been our work on natural disasters in the region has been very minimal. For us, we've started to understand natural disasters in the region very recently through one of the projects, And even though we've been working with communities on awareness on these terms and other things, this is the first time we've actively taken up a project to work on landslides in the region itself. So this is part of the project which Praful sir and I are part of, Keystone Foundation and Save the Hills are part of, which is a consortium of nine organizations which works, across Italy, India, and the United Kingdom. And Nilgiris, as you see, as I mentioned earlier, is highly vulnerable to landslides, and the steep rise in vulnerable locations from 101 locations to 300 in less than a decade, which is very, kind of alarming, which made us kind of step into this kind of an area to start work and start understanding natural disasters and to work with the local organizations and the decision-making authority. And to understand pressures from anthropogenic activities and through climate change, which is a huge thing which we need to keep in mind, especially with the recent, landslides and flooding in the Kerala region, which is slowly moving into the Nilgiris. It's really important for us to kind of, keep our eyes wide open and to kind of, concentrate and take the communities along and building resilience at the same time, understanding what natural disasters we are expecting in the region. And one more thing in the Nilgiris is because we don't have an active early warning system, which kind of pushed Keystone Foundation to be part of this project, to see how an early warning system can be put in place, keeping in mind the diversity this landscape holds in terms of the different settlement typologies, the terrain, the climate, the topology, the different communities and their behavior, that understanding the different linguistics, and all of these things kind of, play a huge role in developing this early warning system, which Keystone kind of, feels really strong in working at the grassroots level to make sure that communities are part of this entire building of this early warning system, so that it is a usable system instead of becoming another system that is just there at the district level to say that, okay, there is something in place, to make it more usable, to say. So also to build some awareness among communities in terms of what kind of natural disasters occurs in the region and why is it happening, and how as communities they can be a part of restoring some of these landscape to original landscape, and to kind of, as GSI says, it's really difficult to kind of stop landslides from happening in the region, but kind of at least being prepared to kind of, say that, okay, some amount of changes can kind of stop landslides in the region, or kind of, control landslides in the region, and help us prevent, mass disaster in the region. So this is something that Keystone has been working on currently. So this is a map of the different vulnerable zones in the region. You see that Kotagiri, Kunur, and Ooty are very close by each other. All the red dots are very highly vulnerable zones in the Nilgiris. And all of these red dots also mean that there is a village out there, so which is highly vulnerable to landslides. So our work has been mostly with the tribals in the Nilgiris, but today we are slowly expanding to the urban areas, trying to work with slum communities, work with the Tamil and other communities which have moved into the district. So in terms of building awareness, at the same time, kind of, bridging the gap between the local, the decision-making authority and the community institutions to come into a common platform to talk about these issues and kind of, reach at a decision where it kind of, it kind of addresses the major issue of disaster in the region. And this is something that we did recently. So as I said, currently we have community volunteers who are monitoring landslides in their own villages and in their region itself. So we have developed, along with the Landslip project and Amrita University, they have developed a mobile application which helps in monitoring and mapping some of the landslides that occurs in the region. So some of these landslides occurred last year during the pandemic itself, during August 2020. And the community volunteers helped us map some of these landslides, and they helped map this through the mobile application that was developed. It's called the Landslide Tracker. And this was again shared with the district administration and the Geological Survey of India. And this was the only entry available with the district administration and the GSI. Because of the pandemic, or because of the shortfall in manpower that the district has, and as well as the GSI has, they've not really been able to cover all the landslides that's been happening in the district, which is one reason why they've not been able to develop a good landslide early warning system for the region. So so not availability of data has been a major issue that was kind of, brought up in the project. So we have been trying to slowly start developing this database where we have citizens contributing towards collecting this data from the region, which will go into the national database of landslides. We have heard that the database is now live, and you can tune into the Geological Survey of India website to see some of their historical landslides. At the same time, we have these landslides that the community citizens are recording, which are out on their portal. And so some of these photographs are something that we also kind of like use when we do their things. This is also from our recent landslides in August 2020. And we categorize them into small, medium, and large based on our knowledge that we've been getting from. So we are not really technical. We don't really know so much technicalities in terms of landslides, but we've slowly been learning from organizations like the British Geological Survey and the Geological Survey of India and here. And we are also attending this course, which some of the students from Prafulji's region, what he suggested, they are also part of this. This is led by Mr. Professor Bruce Malamud. He's the head of the department Geography in King's College London. So he's been like doing this course for us on natural disasters, and so through that course we've been also trying to kind of take in some of the knowledge that's there and to localize and contextualize to our region and take it back to the community so that they are also on the same page when we talk about disasters. So most of our work has been on informing policy and advocacy. Even though we work closely with grassroots, we do a lot of work in kind of community, supporting community organizations with relief, understanding disasters, awareness, and working closely with government organizations. But most of our work has been on looking at sustainable, informing policy for a sustainable future. So how do we inform policy? By looking at it holistically and addressing these issues in an integrated approach, not to look at disasters as in silos, but to look at it in an integrated space in a multidisciplinary area where we look at water, we look at sanitation, we look at hygiene, especially when pandemic hits, especially during this pandemic times, we had a huge issue with hygiene and personal in keeping social distancing in the relief centers. So it is something which is really important when it comes to disasters. When communities are taken to a shape shelter, they share a huge space, they have a community kitchen. How do we maintain hygiene? How do we talk about sanitation? How do we talk about clean water in this kind of environment is also very important. And how ecologically this region is very vulnerable in terms of the massive land use change that has happened, and hydrogeologically how it has been changed a lot. The entire landscape has been changed and it's been retrofitted. So many a times when we talk about disasters, we don't call it natural disasters anymore. We still call it man-made disasters because of this, massive land use change that has happened, and how this entire region has been structured through human interventions. And how do we kind of plan the land use? When we talk about land use, we talk about how do we make sure that we have enough green spaces, how do we restore grasslands in the region, how do we restore some amount of forests in the region, and how can that be and a strategy to kind of mitigate landslides and disasters in the region. And our focus also has been on vulnerable communities, especially when we're talking about a tribal district like the Nilgiris. We have 5 particularly tribal groups which are ranging a few hundred in numbers. They're only found in the Nilgiris. For example, the Tuda community is only found in the Nilgiris in India and in the world itself. And they are less than 1,600 or 1,700 in the number. And they're also directly impacted by landslides and these disasters. And how do we bring them in the forefront in understanding natural disasters and kind of, mitigating these kind of issues in future? So some of our work has been close to that, and also to give them some amount of livelihood security and health security in this district. And so all of our interventions in the village or in the region has been planned based on these factors which have been listed above. There's also much more than that, but I've just put in a few words which we directly work on. And we also develop these replicable models. It's not just landslide early warning, but also we build early warning for wildlife in terms of how there is crop damage in the region, and how do we think about wildlife in the region, especially when it comes to this, how also these landslides and natural disasters trigger a movement of wildlife inside villages. How do we kind of bring communities in sync with this? And we work at different levels. We work at the district, state, and the central level for informed policy decisions. And yeah, I think now it's open for discussions. I think I've tried to put in what we are trying to, we are doing in the district in a capsule form, so that you get a glimpse of what's happening in the Nilgiris, which is far south, and it's not really much there on the national media. And the issues here are not really spoken up so much, even in our state center, which is the Chennai, which we are 500 kilometers away from Chennai. And many times when the decisions are made in Chennai, they don't really consider hill areas as special areas. The policies are made for the plain areas and just imposed upon the hills. So it's really important to look at hill areas as special areas when it comes to decision making and bringing in policies. So most of our work has been on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Gokulji. It was a very wonderful and insightful presentation. If you could just highlight, there was any gaps or challenges faced during pandemic, Keystone Foundation, if they had to go through any changes because of the COVID and the lockdown.
Yes, so there was a lot of challenges, especially if you look at the region where we are working, not just the Nilgiris, but also in Kerala, some parts of Kerala. We have been working in the Wayanad region, especially where it has been experiencing extreme weather events. So some of these villages are really remote, and connectivity in terms of roads is difficult. And especially during high rainfall season, there is flooding in the river, which leaves the community stranded on one side of the river while the relief and the measures are on the other side. So this is especially when Keystone found it difficult to reach these communities to even provide them with basic services in terms of food and shelter and helping them, move to a safer space. It's been really difficult. Luckily, we have not had this issue during the pandemic, but we've had this recurring issue for the past 2 to 3 years. And we have been trying to plan multiple interventions in this region, and in terms of helping them regain their land or start with cultivation, and also to build back their houses and get to a safer space and all those things. But this recurring events of landslides in the Wayanad region and slowly moving towards the Nilgiris has broken the spirits of the communities, to say. And it's been really difficult for us to plan a strategic intervention in the region as well, because of these recurring events. Whatever we do this year is again washed away in the rains and the landslides the next year. And the community is trying to cope back and come back onto their step and trying to do something, and again there is another disaster in place. So that way it's been a really difficult past 2 to 3 years in the field for us, and especially for communities psychologically it's been a huge hit and blow. And to work with these communities, it is and also these communities are shy. When I say tribals, they don't really open up or come out in the open and talk about these issues. And how do we bring these communities into focus when we talk about decision making, or when we talk about services reaching these communities? So we try to build local capacities in the villages, where local youth and women and other groups are formed, where they talk about these issues in the village, and they kind of form a group, and they become first responders from the village. They try to kind of get in touch with the local decision making authority, the government, the panchayat, and the line departments, to move to a safe shelter, or talk about their immediate needs in the region and all that. So from my end, I think it's been really a difficult past 2 to 3 years. But luckily this year, like you see, Nilgiris has had a lot of rainfall events, but we really did not have massive landslides like we had last year from in the avalanche region. So it's still vulnerable. It's highly vulnerable, and we are expecting landslides to happen any minute. But touch wood, this year has been a lucky year for the Nilgiris, especially during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you, sir. Since we have come to the end of the webinar session, I would like
just
to
a second,
invite-
Aradhana. Just
yes.
a second, Aradhana. Gokulji, personally, if you ask me, it's the first time I've heard something on early warnings for the man-animal, concerns, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we work with a lot of states, especially Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh areas and all, they have this as one of the major, for them, much more than the natural hazards and the subsequent disasters. More than that, it's this concern that they are finding it difficult to deal with. So, are you confined to such warnings only to your specific work areas, or is there anything in for such states, or how do you see we can take it up, promoting such warnings to these states where it's a major concern?
Sure. So there are a lot of models, that is available with the forest department itself in terms of mitigating, human wildlife interactions and early warnings for wildlife. And we work very closely with forest department. And in many of our field areas, we work with networks. Even though Keystone Foundation says it works only in the Nilgiris Biosphere Reserve, we have networks across India where we train NGOs. We have networks, which is, where we come together and discuss about these common issues that we have in our field areas. We definitely can share a lot of our knowledge, and we can also train them, and they can also visit us in terms of exposures to see, like the kind of model that we've set in here in the Nilgiris. And for us, it's been really easy because like here there is a lot of honey hunting community, the honeybee communities. The tribal communities practice honey hunting. We used honey boxes, the bee boxes itself, as a early warning system, and also to kind of ward away wild elephants back in the wild. Once it hits the box, the bees are out, and it's kind of disturbing. It's making a lot of noise, and it chases away the elephants back. And in terms of the Indian goat, which is the wild bison, we are planning to kind of set up early warnings at times of where communities are mapping the routes and trying to make sure that these routes are not disturbed, so that there is not much of interaction in the urban scapes and all those areas. So each area has a different strategy in terms of wildlife. And especially we learned that it was very important during the Wayanad floods, when a lot of these big cats like the leopards and the tigers started walking into the human habitations when the disaster was happening, and it was a huge threat for human life and children in the region. So it is really important to talk about wildlife, especially in the disaster, when we are talking about mountainous region and which is highly forested and there is a lot of human wildlife interaction. So definitely we can share a lot of knowledge on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe in our future programs and training initiatives, we can just keep this in mind and get you all connected, so that
Sure.
there's a lot of sharing happening. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to request Shushma ma'am, if ma'am you could give the closing remarks for the session. And I'm sure it was a wonderful session. So ma'am,
it was wonderful to listen to all the three speakers. It's a different area for all of us also, and that's what I was just wondering while listening to all three of them, that how we can take up some future initiatives and some endeavors together, and work with the local governments, because we are now trying to encourage resilience building, and for that I think at the local levels, the grassroots levels, initiatives are a must. I personally, as a faculty, I work with the rural development area, so maybe the Gram Panchayat development plans and integrating such concerns in the rural development sector would be of great use. So let's all just I'm just looking forward to working with all of you all in the coming times. And thank you all. Thank you, Aradhana. Over to you.
Sorry. Since we have reached to the end of the webinar session, I would like to address a vote of thanks. Firstly, I would like to thank our Executive Director, Major General Manoj Kumar Bengal, for always guiding us, supporting us, and motivating us to conduct various webinars. I would definitely like to thank our esteemed speakers of the session. We had today with us Praful Rao, Bapi ji, and even Gokul ji. And it was very important that these NGOs were working at grassroots level, because they work directly with the people. They are involved with the community. So it's very important how their voices are being heard. And especially in times of COVID and pandemic, when the entire world was under lockdown, even these NGOs faced lots of problems. And despite of that, they have been able to overcome the challenges. And, there's always a new beginning for it. And it's really important for us to hear such stories, to hear such different diverse background. And as Gokulji said, we always work in silos. So it's high time, we break those barriers and we come together and work together as one. So for me, the session was very, very wonderful, and it was something which I really look forward to. I would also like to thank Dr. Shishma Guleria. Ma'am has been so supportive, and she immediately said, yes, go ahead with this webinar session. Go ahead and do whatever you want to do. And I'm very grateful for that. And definitely also to the speakers, because in very short notice, they said yes for this webinar session, and all the presentation was done, all the registration was done. So I'm very grateful to the entire panelists. And definitely I would like to thank our participants. I think we did have a good number of participants, and they were there with us till the end of the session. And thank you to the participants for the time and patience. I would also like to tell that feedback link will be mailed to all the participants once we get the attendance list. The feedback link will be shared to everyone, and then we will come to know regarding the participants' feedback as well. So on this note, I would like to end the webinar. If any speakers would like to say something, then it's okay.
All three maybe.
Thanks, Aradhana, for giving us this opportunity, and also to kind of, like enlightening us all the work that other parts of the country is doing. Like I really didn't know about so much about Odisha and the work that Sir is doing there, and it was really interesting for me to kind of learn a lot about what other NGOs in the country are doing. So thanks for this opportunity, and I wish that like National Institute of Disaster Management does a lot more of these webinars, and a lot more stakeholders are brought in a similar forum, so that like we form a consortium, so that we work together, like what you said. Like if we can develop a consortium of NGOs or disaster management workers from the country itself, it'll be a huge step forward in terms of like sharing knowledge, at the same time like working on policy and informing government as to how we can contribute in this entire struggle towards like saving our communities and preserving our landscapes from these huge natural disasters and climate change in future. Thank you.
जैसे कि मैं पहले से ही हम लोग इस सेक्टर में बहुत नया है, डिजास्टर सेक्टर में, बिकॉज हम लोग तो ज़्यादातर नेचुरल रिसोर्स मैनेजमेंट में ही काम करते हैं. सो मुझे ये लगता है कि आपके इंस्टीट्यूट मुझे भी स्कोप देना चाहिए कि मैं कैसे सीखूंगा बहुत. So I have to learn a lot, because just since funny I entered into the disaster management sector, so I have to learn first. So yes, मेरा नेचुरल रिसोर्स मैनेजमेंट पे जो एक्सपीरियंस है वो आई कैन ऑल्सो शेयर, और इसमें मेरा एक्सपर्टी है, आई कैन कंट्रीब्यूट मोर. बट अगेन आपका जो इंस्टीट्यूट है वो मुझे कुछ सीखने के लिए और कोई स्कोप दे तो अच्छा है, बिकॉज वी बोथ कैन डू some good work in Odisha and other state also, because we are very new to it. हाँ, रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी हमारा एक्सपर्टी है, तो इसलिए हम लोग जो भी करते हैं वो रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी को लेके ही सोचते हैं. बट जैसे कि मुझे बोले कि वन कैसे करना है, तो वन कैसे करना है वो मुझे ही पता नहीं है कि कैसे वन करना है, तो हम लोग कैसे कंट्रीब्यूट करेंगे. इसलिए शायद NIDM भी मुझे कुछ हेल्प कर सकता है आगे जाके, कि कैसे हम लोग साथ में मिलकर काम कर सकते हैं. और मुझे भी बहुत अच्छा लगा सुन के दोनों जो अदर रिसोर्स पर्सन्स थे, और मुझे लग रहा था कि क्यों एक थोड़ा छोटा सा गोकुल के लिए क्वेश्चन तो नहीं था, लेकिन मुझे क्यूरियोसिटी है कि क्यों आप ऊटी में ही काम कर रहे हैं और पूरा वेस्ट बंगाल का कर रहे हैं. व्हाई यू चूज टू हिलरिज्म, गोकुल?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Can you please translate? I didn't really get your question. So
when you presented, no, I see that you are working in Ooty and you are also intervening part of West Bengal, I think.
no, not really. Not really. We work in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, but through networks we work around the country. We have an active office in the central India, and we also work in some parts of Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand. We work on like local initiatives and lot on the local food systems in the region. So not much on terms of disaster, but looking at uncultivated food and how do communities kind of, are dependent on their forests, and how are their forest livelihoods helping them? Are there non-timber forest produce? How do we value add and support these communities in this difficult time? So that's some work that we have been doing. And also that's where most of our expertise lies, So even though we don't have an active working space there, we have networks through which we work there. Yeah. But definitely we have a lot of interest in working in that region. Our founder directors have also kind of done a lot of studies around that region, kind of, initially before they started Keystone Foundation itself. So that way they still have some connections to that region and the people that they have initially met.
Okay.
Ma'am, if I may, I'm Praful Rao. May I put in a word?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. I also am a part of another organization called the Integrated Mountain Initiative, IMI as it's known. And DRR, disaster risk reduction, is a prominent theme in our work in IMI. And we do a series of programs right through the year on DRR. So I look forward to really working with NIDM. Perhaps we could do joint programs in the IMI framework. And the IMI consists, if you have a look at our website, it consists of the 11 mountain states and 2 mountain districts of the Himalayas. Unfortunately, we have not, for some reason, integrated the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats. We could look into that. But having said that, we certainly could partner and do some programs through the year in the coming months in the IMI framework and on disaster risk. I really look forward to this.
Of course,
Yes,
maybe
sir. Thank
we
you,
can
sir.
plan a couple of
Since
programs
we have
in
come to the end of the webinar session,
calendar coming year.
I would like to thank all the participants and the panelists for their time, for their consideration, and for patience. So, on this note, I would like to end the webinar here. Ma'am, shall I end the webinar?
Yeah. Thank you, Aradhana. Thank you so much for all your
Okay.
coordination.
So, on this note, I would like to end the webinar here. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. Hope to see you
Bye-bye.
once again. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Be safe.